tied the game in the top of the ninth inning. Well, a little while ago when we mentioned that this one, in typical fashion, was going right to the wire, little did we know. Mark Ditbar throws. Here's a swing and a high fly ball going deep left. They do it. Back to the wall goes Guy. It is over. The Pirates win. The World Series for the Pittsburgh Pirates by a score of 10-0. Once again, that final score. The Pittsburgh Pirates, the 1960 World Champions, defeat the New York Yankees. The Pirates 10 and the Yankees 9. It is all over in one of the most dramatic finishes on history. Bill Mazeroski has hit his second World Series home run over the left field barrier, 406 feet away, and the Pirates are the 1960 World Champions of baseball.
In 1960, Bill Mazeroski hit potentially the biggest home run in World Series history with his walk-off game-winning home run against the Yankees to win the series for the Pirates. This play alone is probably the most important play, obviously, of his career, but it might even, expand past that and have ramifications for how he's looked at as a player. And I think really what we wanted to kind of talk about here today is, are there players in the Hall of Fame where one game, one performance, one moment made the difference on whether or not they got into the Hall of Fame? And when you look at a guy like Bill Mazeroski, I'm inclined to say yes.
And it really shouldn't be, right? You think about it, if you add up a whole guy's career, could one play make the difference between you being a Hall of Fame? How could that be? One at bat, one strikeout. But in the case of Mazeroski, I think it's true also.
Yeah, and it's not that, the rest of their career wasn't good enough to get there. It wasn't like Bill Mazeroski had bad numbers. But the issue is when you look at his career numbers, nothing really. He was a .260 hitter who had 138 home runs.
He had 8 Gold Gloves.
Yeah, but, there are plenty of guys with a lot of Gold Gloves, but those offensive statistics are but one of those 138 home runs was the most important home run in World Series history up until Joe Carter.
Context is important here, though. So in 1960, the Yankees were the powerful team still, and the Pirates were this upstart team. They got throttled in that World Series, outscored 55-27. So when Mazeroski comes up, he hit, 11 home runs in his whole career or something like that.
It was 138.
Oh, sorry. 11 home runs that season.
Okay,
my mistake. And, he comes up in the bottom of the ninth and hits a game-winning walk-off home run over Yogi Berra's head. Everything came to, for the Pirate fans, that was the first time they won the World Series in a really, really long time. So it meant a lot more than it might seem when you look at it from a lens of 60 years.
Right, but still, regardless, that moment can mean as much as it means without it meaning Bill Mazeroski deserves to be in the Hall of Fame based on the culmination of his career statistics. There is no doubt that is one of the greatest moments in postseason baseball history.
Well, a walk-off home run on the bottom. There's only been 2 walk-off home runs in the history of the World Series.
Exactly. Every kid is out there when they're playing baseball in their backyard dreaming of hitting the Game 7 walk-off home run. Bill Mazeroski actually did it. So, that has to count for something. But does it mean it should count for you to be a Hall of Famer?
Well, and I think you'd contend that, perhaps it's not even the greatest Game 7 of them all, yet Major League Baseball rated it number 1 out of all the Game 7s.
Granted, yeah, I think I would argue that the Cubs-Indians World Series from a couple of years back would surpass that. But still, even if it was, nobody's arguing that Rajai Davis should be a Hall of Famer because he hit that home run.
Absolutely. So would you argue that Mazeroski's home run made the difference in his career? Making the Hall of Fame.
I think I have to argue with that because I can't see how he would get in without that play. I think it would be very hard for a lot of people to make that argument that sans him hitting that game-winning home run, he would be in the conversation. When guys like Bobby Grich and Lou Whitaker aren't in the Hall of Fame, and he is, even though his career statistics don't even come close to theirs. Right.
And their careers are much better and didn't have that one shining moment.
He had the moment, but it's not like there aren't guys that had that moment that, it probably did help them and it should have. Like you had Jack Morris.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that game 7, 1-0, 10-inning complete game. That's crazy stuff.
And that was the reason I think that put him over the edge. And sometimes that also makes sense. That's also what's right. Because his career numbers were really good, and he had that stretch of 6 or 7 seasons where he was dominant.
Right. He gets the Jay Jaffe checkbox there for having that sustained period of excellence or whatnot.
But when you have that one moment in the 90s, in that World Series where you carry your team, especially in a Game 7, with a complete game shutout. I think that's important. It's not just a complete game.
So you'd say that it should have made the difference, and it did make the difference in his case.
I think it was definitely a contributing factor. I think there are more arguments for Morris being in the Hall of Fame, if you don't count that performance as something extra, than Mazeroski.
So without it, maybe.
Without it, maybe. With it, I think that really helped him.
So how about guys like you mentioned him before, right? Had the other guy who had the walk-off home run in the sixth game of the World Series, Joe Carter.
And when you look at Joe Carter's number, what's interesting is I didn't realize he had as much power as he did.
Right, he was a power hitter.
That he had almost 400 career home runs. That's not insignificant.
At a time when getting to 400 meant more than it did after McGuire and Bonds and all that stuff.
He was also a career 259 hitter. And
three players under 260 in the Hall of Fame.
And his WAR is 19.6, which to me probably means he was not the best fielder, to put it lightly.
That would be probably
considering
true.
His career numbers were pretty good, and his on-base wasn't awful given his average. But he also hit one of the other game-winning Game 7 home run in World Series.
Touch 'em all, Joe. You'll never hit a bigger home run was the call. That's one of the great moments.
So I think for him, it's more the case of, unlike Jack Morris, he didn't have enough of the career before that moment to really have that one moment bolster him in there.
Now here's something to remember with the Joe Carter thing. The Blue Jays won the World Series in '92, and then Carter hits the home run in '93, and in '94 is a strike year. So the Blue Jays were actually champion for an extra year before in 1995.
And you almost think, unlike Mazeroski, they had been winning before that home run.
Right.
So unlike Mazeroski, who was bringing the Pirates their first championship, Carter was already doing it for the best team in baseball, essentially. So it's a little less meaningful because of that. Through no fault of his own. What are you going to do, penalize the guy for playing on a good team?
I don't think you'll get any Blue Jay fans to agree with you there on that one, though. They revere that home run. That's like Joe Carter is a saint in Toronto.
And I'm not saying that wasn't an unbelievable home run. I'm just saying that home run, in terms of the legacy for his career, doesn't have the same mystique about it that the Mazeroski does, because it wasn't their first championship.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
They weren't beating the evil empire and the Yankees.
So what happens then if it's not a home run, but it's a big hit? Does it have to be a home run in order to be career-changing?
I mean, Luis Gonzalez. If you're talking about him, he even beat the evil empire in the Yankees. He beat the greatest closer to ever play in Mariano Rivera. But it was a soft line drive single to center field.
Well, Luis Gonzalez is not in the Hall of Fame, yet his career statistics they surprise me, actually.
You forget the 57 home run season. He had a little bit less home runs than Joe Carter, but he also hit 283.
A career WAR of 51.7 over 18 years. That's right there. He's in the conversation.
He's in the conversation, but the soft line drive single isn't.
Yeah. So if it's a home run, maybe Luis Gonzalez is in the Hall of Fame. But it's a soft single, even if it's off Rivera, it's not the same.
It's just not as indelible a moment. It's still an unbelievable baseball moment, but it's not the kind of things that lionize you in the eyes of the baseball writers who are voting you in to the same degree that I think a home run does.
And you have to remember our premise here, right? Because we both feel there's room for some more people, so we can look at these fringe guys and go, should they get another look? Should they be considered in a way that maybe they haven't been when it was their time?
And I think actually Luis Gonzalez is probably a guy that should have been more strongly considered when you look at the career that he put together. At the same time, I think for him, there's a lot of years where he didn't do much, especially early in his career. It wasn't until he headed to Arizona that he really started to become a much more dominant type player compared to his early years with Houston and Chicago.
He just seemed to be a better hitter, you're right, when he got to Arizona, like he figured something out.
Yeah, really, if you look at his career, he had never hit 300 this season before he goes to Arizona in 99 and hits 336. And then he hits 300 for the next, 3 or 4 seasons.
Yeah, well, some guys, do come around and figure it out later in their career and become better players.
Exactly. At age 31, he put it together.
Yeah. So a guy that I remember growing up around this area and was a pitcher for a short while for the Mets, and had an epic Game 7 where he pitched a complete game, a 6-2 victory for the Minnesota Twins in 1987. It's Frank Viola. He is not in the Hall of Fame, and for a number of years, Frank Viola had what would be considered, statistics that would be up there with the very best pitchers in the game. He won a Cy Young, but he's not in the Hall of Fame. And I think we talked about this, at one point off air, and you said, well, he's got to pitch a shutout.
Oh, he does. I mean, when you look, that's the difference, I think, between him and Morse, because him and Morse have pretty similar numbers when you look at their careers. They both won a Cy Young. They both won a World Series. They have similar career WARs, even number of wins in ERA, but Morse threw a complete game shutout in Game 7 of the World Series to win 1-0. Viola, won 6-2? It doesn't have the same mystique.
I laugh. So Gonzalez has got to hit a homer, and Viola's got to pitch a shutout, and then they're in a closer way to have a conversation about them actually being in the Hall of Fame on one play.
Yes.
Or one game.
Because you have to, the play has to be that much more. If you're going to argue that this one play is the reason why you kind of deserve to be in the Hall of Fame over your peers who might have similar career numbers, it's got to be a hell of a play.
Okay. So there are other guys in their famous plays in baseball who had shining moments that are Hall of Fame worthy, but that their careers, maybe it wouldn't have made that much of a difference. The first guy, and I'm sure you've seen this clip, is Carlton Fisk.
Oh yeah, jumping, trying to wave the ball.
Yeah, it's a crazy clip, right?
Yeah.
It's just one of the most fun things. But Carlton Fisk is a Hall of Famer, independent of that play. That play did not put him in the Hall of Fame, not even close. I think.
Exactly. Like, you could erase that play from his career, and Carlton Fisk is still a Hall of Famer. That's the thing. Like, there are some guys that are like that, where that's the difference between him and Mazeroski. If you erase the home run from Mazeroski's career, it gets a lot harder for him to make the argument that on the basis of his career alone, without that play, he's a Hall of Famer.
He's pretty much standing on his 8 Gold Gloves.
Exactly.
That's basically where he is.
And 8 Gold Gloves, is that enough to get you in the Hall of Fame?
And it didn't work for Edmonds.
I don't know. And Edmonds was a much better offensive player.
I agree with you 100% on that.
And so I think when you look at a guy like Carlton Fisk, everything backs up he's in the Hall of Fame, even if he doesn't have that play. And I think the same as the next guy, the next guy I'm going to bring up, Bob Gibson.
Huh.
I mean, 1-0. Hits the home run.
Seventh game. World Series. And hits a home run.
Yeah. Like, what do you want? What more do you want to do? Complete game shutout, dominates, and there's you will not.
I don't think it was a 1-0 game, but I think
might be
he hit
wrong
a home run. Yeah.
But regardless, I don't think there's a baseball fan on earth that's going to argue that Bob Gibson doesn't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame.
I read something recently about Gibson and how his last at bat he gave up a home run to a guy named Pete Lecoq, and in an old timers game 15 years later, Lecoq steps into the box. Gibson drills him in the back with a fastball. Just love.
No way he's going to forget that. No. There's
the guy
who
would knock his own mother down if she was standing too close over the plate.
Yeah, if you hit a home run, he's going to remember that 15 years later. He's going to pay you back for that.
So a guy that I'd like, I don't know how much you know about him, but he obviously Hall of Famer, Raleigh Fingers, had a great Game 7, I guess, if you think of it in the time, 3 1/3 relief innings against the Mets in the 7th game of the 1973 World Series.
That's why you remember it.
That's why, not the truth. But he also had, 340 career saves and was really the first that I remember, like, relief pitcher who made being a relief pitcher was cool. He won the MVP, or whatnot. And so I think he would have been in the Hall of Fame independent of, and it's not that dynamic other than 3 1/3 innings today for a relief pitcher. If a guy went and did that today, except for Madison.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm gonna. You cut me off before I brought it up, but yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see at the end of Madison Bumgarner's career. Now, I don't know his career numbers, so I really don't know.
They're good. Without looking at them at all, I would say that he has to have maybe another couple of good seasons, but he's right there.
He's right there. It's an interesting premise of, will that Game 7 performance against the Royals make the difference for him in the long run, where you're going to look back and say, that was one of the gutsiest playoff performances we've ever seen. And this guy was so good that, he kind of deserves to be there because of that.
And Red Sox fans, we know Chris Sale came in and finished the game too, but it wasn't like Bumgarner's performance in that particular game.
There was something more magical about
Bumgarner. And it was longer. Like, Bumgarner pitched multiple
innings. The whole game itself.
Yeah, like 5 or 6 innings or something.
He came in early, and he was in there for a while, and nobody really expected him to be pitching. That's what made it more impressive.
So we've covered guys where it made the difference. We covered a guy in Jack Morris where it should have made a difference, and it did, that he had this game. We covered where it could have made the difference in the Joe Carter case or Luis Gonzalez and Viola, or this situation where it didn't make a difference with Fisk, Gibson, and Fingers. But what about situations where it was a great Game 7, it's not enough, and that's what it should be.
I think there's always going to be guys like that, because there's always a chance that in a single game some guy pops off and has an unbelievable performance. But you're never going to argue that one game, that one performance means that guy should be a Hall of Famer.
I mean, he had to be pretty good to begin with to even have the conversation. I'm not talking about a guy like, Al Weiss in the Mets who never did anything and had one World Series. It doesn't matter.
Right, but still, if you're in the game in Game 7 of a World Series, you have a chance to be a hero, even if the rest of your career isn't anything that special.
So guys like, there's a few guys in this that come to mind. Johnny Padres. So he was.
I'm guessing he did not pay for the Padres.
And that was a POD, Padres. He pitched a complete game shutout in the 1955 World Series. He's not in the Hall of Fame, and he had a pretty mediocre career, but that particular World Series is important to Dodger fans because the Dodgers would lose every year to the Yankees, every year. And the wait till next year thing came out of the Dodgers, and they must have lost 4 or 5 World Series to the Yankees from the mid-40s to the 1950s. Could never win. This was the year.
So they were like the Bills of the NFL.
They were like, except they actually won.
Oh, that's important.
So they won that 1955 series. So at the time, it was a bigger thing, and Padres probably got a lot of, notoriety for this because it's New York area or whatnot, but it wasn't enough to push him over. Shouldn't have been enough to push him
the guy
over.
had 29 career WAR in 15 seasons.
Yeah.
So, that one...
Nice pitcher,
but he's not a Hall of Famer.
So a guy that you might know from reputation, but obviously you didn't see him play, Gene Tennis was a catcher for the A's in the 1970s and had an epic World Series.
An epic World Series.
An epic World Series. Hit 4 home runs in the World Series, including the go-ahead double in the 6th inning of Game 7. So he had a 47 WAR. So I never really thought of him as a Hall of Famer, but as a catcher
you actually can start making the argument that maybe this guy kind of does deserve to be.
And there's a dearth of catchers in the Hall of Fame for whatever reason. There's a bit of a catcher bias or an anti-catcher bias.
But I almost wonder when you look at his career, this guy was a 240 hitter.
Yeah, that's not 260, folks. That's 240. I don't know how I argue for that.
And so I wonder when you look at the fact that he was playing back in his first season was 69, but he really didn't start playing until the mid-70s. So he was playing in the mid-70s into the early 80s. Is the fact that he had 46 WAR more a function of catchers back then just weren't that great, and so the fact that he was better than average elevated his WAR to
But we talk about that. You compare it to your peers, to the guys you played against, and if you're playing with a bunch of less than great catchers, let's be charitable here, and you were among the better of those not so great catchers, it counts.
Yeah, and especially because he was hitting with power that most catchers weren't hitting.
Definitely.
He almost had a 30 home run season back in 75.
Catchers batting cleanup, were a rarity. I think Johnny Bench and Gary Carter are the only two that really come to mind in my memory where they batted cleanup all the time, and that was pretty unusual. Catchers didn't do that.
I think it's also just tough to say that a guy that was a one-time All-Star and never really led the league in anything other than walks a couple times is a Hall of Famer.
Another guy who had an amazing World Series in 1968 for the Detroit Tigers is Mickey Lolich, a big, let's say, heavy-set lefty, will be nice. It was a year in 1968, an important year, because Denny McLain won 31 for the Tigers, so now you have the other guy, Lolich, on the team, win 3 games in the World Series. And the next year was the year that they lowered the mound, because that was the year in 1968 of the pitcher. The pitchers were dominating the hitters so much that Major League Baseball decided to shave a little bit off the mound, a couple of inches.
A couple of inches?
Okay, and so that changes the angle of the fastball. Bob Gibson, that season in 68, had pitched to a 1.12 season ERA. I don't think that's ever happened.
No, it'll never happen again.
It'll never happen again because they changed. So Mickey Lolich coming out of nowhere and winning 3 games, but then I went and looked at his career. He had a better career than I thought, and so the argument is, does that game put him in? I don't think so, but his career WAR of 48 and 16 seasons.
When you look at his career, he's definitely somebody that I think would be closer than both Padres and Tennis.
Tennis.
Because when you look at his career, it's actually pretty good.
Right. I think of and there's one other guy I'll throw in there, is Lou Burdette of the Milwaukee Braves in 1957, won 3 games against the Yankees. And you can't estimate how important it is that you beat the Yankees, because they were such winners at that time that beating them was more meaningful to teams than you might have expected.
Yeah, you would have to increase the value because you're beating the Yankees, and especially the collection of players that they had at the time. You were essentially competing against the Hall of Fame team on its own right.
Absolutely, and so Burdette, pitched a complete game shutout in Game 7, just like you want.
Exactly, gives you more than Viola.
Okay, but he's not in the Hall of Fame, pitched for 18 years, and when you look at the stats...
I mean, he didn't strike out 308 guys in a season.
Yeah, but the career stats just, I think the last 7 years of his career were really bad comparatively to the beginning. And you can't have that long a period of
and
not being great.
That was Mickey Lulich that struck out 308 guys.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think
Burdette
ever struck out more than...
He wasn't a strikeout pitcher, as I remember reading. So.
No, yeah, he did not strike out that
much. In any event, the argument there is that Burdette, his great Game 7 shutout, he did all that, won 3 games in the World Series. Great performance, not enough.
Not enough, no. And so I think when we're all done with this, I think one of the more interesting concepts is right now there are players, managers, and owners in the Hall of Fame. And umpires? Are umpires in the Hall of Fame?
There are umpires in the Hall of Fame.
So you get those 4 things. But only those 4 things. I think you could make the argument that the Baseball Hall of Fame should be celebrating more than just the people, but the indelible moments of baseball. And I think there are definitely single plays, single moments that should be enshrined there because what they mean to the fabric of baseball and the tapestry of the story and the history.
Not only the moments, I think that the players associated with those moments to give them sort of a place in the Hall of Fame that they might not have had otherwise. There are, if you walk through the Hall of Fame, I've done it, there are monuments to different things that have happened through the game over the years.
But I think there's something right about enshrining certain moments, both good, bad, and infamous, because there are certainly plays in my mind that, you wouldn't call that a good play in the realm of baseball, but you kind of have to have it in there.
Yes, absolutely. And it doesn't have to be a playoff game. It doesn't have to be a World Series game. It could be something that happened in the regular season.
But it's something that every baseball fan that's a crazy baseball fan, or even not necessarily baseball, but somebody just loves the game, will have at least heard of these moments and or seen them at some point in their life. And I feel like anything that gets passed down through the ages like that deserves to be mentioned.
That'll be a fun topic. We'll do that next time.
Yeah.